I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Arakwal people of the Bundjalung Nation, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Human Design Podcast with me, your host, Emma Dunwoody. I'm a qualified master coach and human behaviour specialist, as well as being a qualified human design coach. And I work with clients every single day to answer the big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And what is my purpose? I also assist them to transition from the person they think they should be to the person they really are on the inside. I teach people how to actually live their design instead of just knowing it. And if this is something that you want to do too, well, stay tuned or reach out for private coaching or Human Design Unpacks, where I show you exactly how to live your design.
Hey everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Okay, so we have the next topic in our Human Design Roadmap series. I'm going to be talking about gates and channels today. Now, this is a big topic, and I feel like this is one that so many people, when they come to human design, or like maybe not right at the beginning, but really early in their journey, they get into human design and they're like, oh my God, I need to dive into the gates and the channels. Then they get overwhelmed. They don't resonate. They don't understand them. It's confusing. Then they read the gene keys and it gets even worse. So my intention here today is to really simplify this process and give you some really actionable, practical ways that you can start to work with and understand what your gates and channels are, and how you can access these superpowers that lie within you. Now, I want to start off by saying that so much of the original human design language is very negative, okay? Now, in this series, I probably haven't mentioned it much, but I mention it a lot on the podcast. So one of the things I want you to understand is that the language from the original content and knowledge can be very focused on shadow, negativity, what's wrong, what's bad. And what I really want to invite you to do today is to understand that there is no such thing. As we get closer to the new paradigm, as we raise our consciousness, we are moving away from the binary. We're moving away from right, wrong, good, bad, do this, don't do that, and starting to understand that the higher we go in our consciousness, the more that there isn't right and wrong. There's just resourceful and unresourceful. It's either working for you or it's not working for you. And that same thing might work for others, and not work for you, or it might work for you and not work for others. And that is all okay. So I would really encourage you with all of human design, but especially as we dive into the gates and channels, to understand that every single gate and channel is your superpower. Now, one of the things that I hear and see so often in my work and in the classes that I run and working with private clients is that way too often we are actually criticizing ourselves and in fact trying to change something about ourselves that is actually our superpower. It's something that is part of the beauty of us that's actually going to help us fulfill our purpose. Let me give you a really simple example of this in my own life. Now, one of the things that I've tried to, inverted commas, change about myself for years up until human design was that I felt like I was inconsistent and wishy-washy. Like I would start something and then I would stop it, or I would do something for 5 days and then I would take 2 days off. And I was constantly in this place where I was trying so hard to be consistent. Now, consistency does lead to success in all areas of your life. But what I want you to understand is what I didn't realize at the time is that I had been taught that consistency could only be one thing. And that is that I keep doing the same thing that I need to do day in, day out. And that is what creates change. Now, yes, this is true. This works. It's also the way that the masculine energy works. It's why the patriarchy teaches us that's what consistency looks like, because the male energy actually has a 24-hour cycle. The female energy has a 28-day energy cycle. So how can consistency for something that resets every 24 hours be the same as for someone, someone that is 24 hours versus someone who has an energy cycle of 28 days? That's going to look really freaking different. So I was trying to fix and change and solve this problem that I had, that I thought I could never stick to one thing. I thought I was inconsistent, all of these things. Now, the thing that I need you to understand is that if we just take one area of my life, I have had incredible success, like huge, high-level success in sport. Yet I'm still criticizing myself that there's no way I can succeed in business unless I can become more consistent. What I wasn't noticing, and actually what my brain was not letting me see, because it was distorting, it was deleting, distorting, and generalizing the information. What I wasn't seeing is that my form of consistency still leads me to success. Okay. It's just that it doesn't look like anyone else's. So often, and of course that is all in my design, but this isn't about me. This is just about you. This is about me trying to help you dive into your channels and gates today and understanding that your design is perfect just the way it is. So I want you to start to pay attention to those areas that you feel like need changing, that need to be different, that you resist. There's also a place where with human design, you'll hear me talk a lot about, does it resonate with you? Okay. You want to pay attention to what resonates with you. You also want to pay attention to the things that you go, no, nah, that's not me. I don't like it. Anywhere that you have a big reaction that even has that, that child version of you, child language, childlike tone, anything like that, because that is your inner child coming forward and actually resisting something that potentially is you. Okay. Let me give you a simple example of that too. So when I first came to human design, I definitely felt that way about my 3-5 profile. I was like, nah, I don't like that. It feels true, but I don't like it. Don't tell me that. I don't want to be constantly in trial and error. And I certainly don't frame it that way. That's not the way I perceive being a line 3 anymore. I perceive it more as being an alchemist and being an experimenter, an adventurer. And these things work really well for me. And it's a much lighter energy, a higher frequency than being told that it's trial and error. I'm always going to be falling down and getting back up again. So you want to notice these reactions, that you have in your body. So resonance is going to feel good, like it's truth, like it feels comfortable, like almost like you're remembering, those sort of things. That's like resonance. That's yes, that's true. Then there's going to feel like it's with the mind, like maybe, I don't know, like there's kind of almost not a great deal of body response at all. And then you're going to feel like you're almost throwing a tantrum about it, if you're really honest with yourself. And that is also probably something you need to look at, because that's resisting a piece of you. Okay. So let's talk about the gates. There are 64 gates in the human design chart. And if you have that chart in front of you, you're going to see that we have the big shapes, the triangles, the squares. They are our centers. And within those centers, there are a bunch of numbers. Okay, they are the gates. The gates correlate to the Chinese I Ching. The I Ching is the book of changes. It's now scientifically been proven that it maps back to the 64 DNA codons within the human body. Okay, so this is why the gene keys is called the gene keys, because it's all about these 64 DNA codons that we have as human beings. Now, within each one of these gates, it carries a specific theme through the frame of the I Ching. And I believe, so I'm not an expert on the I Ching. So those of you that are listening that are, I apologize if I'm messing it up. However, the book of changes is exactly that. There are 64 ways that human beings can evolve, is basically simplified down. And this is that journey. So within every gate, there is a line or a line number that starts with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. So you always have these 6 numbers, and this is the journey through each gate, or the journey through each hexagram, or the journey through each gene key. Gates and gene key same deal. The gates is something that we're going to talk about in human design. Gene keys is what we talk about in gene keys. That's Richard Rudd and his work. He's amazing. He's wonderful. And then we have the gates, which is something that was channeled through by Ra Uru Hu. Okay, so although they have different names and they even have different representations or different, they've got different, not hugely different meanings, but there's nuances that are different between the gates and the gene keys, but they are similar. Okay. All right. So what does this mean to you as the person who's sitting there confused and like, oh my God, this is so much information, but what does it mean for me? So these are the areas where differentiation amplifies. Okay. So if we go back to square one, and what I mean by square one is if we think about human design and Ra Uru Hu's book and the way he called it, the science of differentiation, the whole purpose of human design is to differentiate ourselves. What does that mean in simple terms? To access our uniqueness, to really understand the truth of who we are on an individual level, and then how we can use that or be that or contribute that to the collective. All right. So the gates and the channels are where we start to get into a real depth of differentiation, because this is where the nuances come in. This is where the details come in. This is where, your individual superpowers show up, beyond type and definition. This is where we get into the nitty-gritty of the energy that lies within you and how you express your energy and where your focus goes in that energy. Are you focusing on the shadow or the fear of that energy, or are you focusing on the higher expression of that, the light, the love expression of those things? So your gates, you're also going to notice, if you're looking at your chart, you're going to notice on the right-hand side and on the left-hand side, you have two columns. On the right-hand side, this is the personality side, okay? This is who you think you are. It's who people kind of see you as you. It's how you're going to present to the world. It's more mental. You're very aware of it. You're probably going to be aware of journeys that you go through with the particular themes in those gates. And on the left-hand side, that's what we call the body, okay? It's also can be referred to as the unconscious. I think it's more innate than unconscious. And the difference, my distinction between innate and unconscious is that unconscious is like, it's just running a pattern underneath your conscious awareness and it's just happening, like breathing does in the body. Or innate to me is it's like, it's there all the time. But you might not notice it until someone says, wow, you're really good at that thing. Or wow, you're like this, aren't you? And it's not until someone brings it to your attention, you're like, oh yeah, wow. Yep, totally. Yep, absolutely. So that's just my distinction. Okay. There's a lot of schools of thought that, especially in the older community, I think people don't do it so much now, but that people wouldn't pay too much attention to the unconscious side of the chart because it's unconscious. And I say bullshit. The conscious side of the chart, so the left-hand side of the chart, that is your body, that is your vehicle and your soul's purpose. So this is going to be what is driving you around this life. So if you're in alignment with the gates on that side of your chart, I want you to imagine that you're driving around in the vehicle, and the vehicle is your body. And when you're in alignment with those energies, then that vehicle is driving straight to your purpose, to who you came here to be, the impact you came to have, the connections you came to have, the experiences that you came to have, and you're just driving straight down the road. Now, if you're not in alignment with the body side of the chart, the way I feel, it's like you're swerving all over that road. You don't know where you're going. The vehicle is all over the place. So it's really important to be in alignment with both sides, the personality side of the chart and the body side of the chart. Okay. So the way that each gate has a specific theme about it. Okay. And the I Ching is beautiful because it tells in each hexagram, as it calls them, it tells a little story. It tells a little story that's like a fable or like a fable or something, those little stories that, I don't know about you, but my mum read me this book when I was a kid that was all about the Aboriginal Dreamtime stories. And it would teach me about morals and values and how to grow and evolve as a human and how to treat the animals and the planet and all of that sort of stuff. And I had a book for my kids that was like the Buddha bedtime stories, which is really the same. So it was always like trying to teach a life lesson. Well, each gate is kind of like that, where it's kind of trying to teach a life lesson. In human design, if you look at the gates through the frame of the human design, they can sometimes be a little bit two-dimensional, in my opinion, which means it's like if you have gate 37, it is the gate of friendship and community, and that's it. Whereas when you look at the gene keys talk about the journey from the shadow to the gift to the Siddhic state. So for me, that's more like the fable. And for me, it makes more sense because I don't believe anything's fixed. Again, Ra thought a lot of this was fixed. He thought we were like kind of like this was who we were born into being. We had no choice. This was it. And again, I don't agree with that at all. I don't believe that anything is fixed. I believe that we have the opportunity. Yes, we have this design, and yes, we have these superpowers that lie within us, but the way we express that energy, that's completely up to us. And that is going to open us up to huge potential of, who we can be and what we came here to do. So that's what I want you to think about for the gates. So they're themes. They're very specific themes. Some of them are very practical, like the gate of the listener. Some of them feel really scary, like the gate of crisis. Some of them feel really, really good, like the gate of the joyous. However, no matter what they're called, they are all of equal value. They are no more scary or better or worse or, happier than the other. All right. It's just some of them have language that might feel a little bit limiting, but once you sort of dive into those gates and maybe you add the gene keys to it. Having said all of this, you can get a summary of the gates, the Rave I Ching, and the gene keys. We have a big summary document of all of those that you can buy on the website. So you can go through each gate that you've got and look at the gene keys in summary. I do highly recommend buying the book, like the Gene Keys book. It's beautiful. I've been in my experiment for a very long time now. And literally I was listening to the 37 again the other week. I was listening to the 36 just the other day. So I read it and I have it on audiobook and I have it like a hardcover book as well. So I highly recommend buying it. Okay. So within all of these gates of yours, they are ways that you express your energy. Now, one of the things I want you to understand is that often when we go in to learn our gates, we pull them apart. So we might pull it apart like we want to look at our incarnation cross, which is our personality, sun and earth, which is the top two numbers on the right-hand side, followed by the top two numbers on the left-hand side of the chart. That's your incarnation cross. So you might dive into them. Or you might want to, through the gene keys, look at the Pearl sequence. So that's going to be, you dive into your design Mars, your design Jupiter. Again, you're going to look at your personality Sun, and then you're going to look at your personality Jupiter, and you'll pull those out. There's going to be lots of different ways that you can pull different gates out of the chart. There's a lot of people teaching that this part of the chart means this and that part of the chart means that. But one of the things that I've learned over the years is that you really need to just listen to them all, play with them all, learn them all. And then when you put them all back together, that's when you really become, that's what's important, how they all come back together. What are the patterns? What are the themes? What are the reoccurring words? What are the reoccurring, focal points or superpowers? Or do you have a lot of individual circuitry? Do you have a lot of, tribal circuitry? Like looking for all of those things and how it all comes together is just as important as the individual themes within each gate or channel. I hope that makes sense. So a little bit more of the technicality. Let us talk about, you're looking at your chart, you see all the numbers in the big shapes, and you have a colored in shape. Let's say you have the head center. Okay, so the top center at the top of the chart, and the 61 is colored in, and there's a line that goes down to the 24. That's a channel. Okay, so when two centers are colored in, it means that there must be a channel. There must be a channel running from one center to the next center, because that's what lights it up. So everyone has at least one channel in their design except for reflectors. Okay, reflectors are the only ones that don't have any channels. Now, channels are when two gates meet, and it's energy that is consistently running back and forward through those two gates. Those two gates are going to have individual themes on their own. And then when they come together, they bring like a third theme, if you like, to that channel. Let me give you an example really simply. I'm going to simply explain the 40-37. The 40 is kind of like the masculine. It's work. It's providing resources. It's very materially focused. And then the 37 is all about family. It's about nurturing. It's about taking care. It's about community. And when the two of them come together, they create this channel that they call a channel of marriage. It's like the masculine and the feminine coming together in a bond or a relationship. Okay. So it's like these two different energies come together and they add extra to those individual energies within the chart. So that is a channel. And that channel, if in your own chart, the energy is always moving backward and forward in that channel all the time, okay? Energy wants to get to the throat, okay? So wherever everything's going, and the energy is pushed up into the root center from Gaia, and the energy is pushed down into the head center from source and consciousness, and it pushes that energy around your chart. It pushes that around your body, around your aura, through those two pressure centers. And then the object of the game is to get the energy to the throat, to manifestation. Now, what's going to happen is that unless you're a manifestor or a manifesting generator, you are going to need to get help to get that energy to the throat. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't manifest as well as a manifestor or manifesting generator. That is not true. Everyone can manifest equally as well as anyone else. It just means that the universe will need to bring you people or transits or those sort of things to keep that energy moving all the way to the throat. But that's not something you ever have to worry about. Okay, so if you don't have that energy highway that's always plugged in all the way to the throat, don't worry about it. The universe has got you. Okay, so gates. If you look at your chart, if you look at those little numbers in each of the shapes, they are the gates. Now, I've talked about a channel. It's one's colored in and connected to the other one. So it makes a whole channel between each center. The next thing is the gate. So the gate, if let's say you have a hanging gate means that you'll see that there is the gates colored in, and then there's like half a channel, half a line. That's a hanging gate. Now, if that hanging gate is in a colored in center, then that means that that's switched on all the time. Okay, so that means that that energy is consistent, it's reliable, it's always there for you, it's expressing. So let's say you have the sacral and you have the 14. It means that that 14 energy of, you having access to your power skills, so your unique way of working in the world, it's always there, it's always on, it's always ready for you to access it. Okay. And, if you're expressing the shadow of that, then you're forcing yourself to work the way other people want you to work over and over and over again. Like it's always on and it's pounding at you. Or you're like, oh, wow, I see that that's the shadow. And now it's time for me to flip into my true expression of the work that I love to do. And then all of a sudden it's not pounding at you all day. It's like lifting you up all day. Make sense? I hope so. Then the next option is that you have a gate, a hanging gate in an undefined center. So let's say, for example, I have the gate 18 in an undefined spleen. What that means is that energy, when it's switched on, so either I'm in my husband's aura because he has a defined spleen. So once I'm in his aura, that activates my spleen, and my gate 18 is on. It's in play. It means that I have a way of expressing that gate 18 when it's activated, when it's switched on, when there's energy plugged into it. And that's the way that I'm going to express that energy. Okay. But then as soon as I'm not in his aura, and I'm on my own and nothing else is plugging it in through the transits, then it's almost like it just sits there and waiting. Now, from a behavioral point of view, I've noticed that often with my hanging gates, I have noticed that I often have, like, I already have the neural pathway, like I do that behavior. So gate 18, that gate of correction, yes, it's a common behavior that I do. So even though it's not necessarily activated all the time, it is something that I see is in my natural energy. But what I think is also very interesting is, now that I've been in my experiment for so long, I also know that my gate of correction has really, like, it used to be a lot more amplified. It was almost like I knew that it was something in me that I would almost push and force to happen. Whereas now I'm not as aware of it all the time. So yeah, that's a nice little experiment for you to play with. So your hanging gates can be in defined or undefined centers. Now, you'll often hear me use terms like, oh, it's a prominent place in your design. Your sun, through the frame of astrology, Western astrology, they say 70% of the way you express in the world is your sun sign. Isn't it funny? I feel like that's not necessarily true these days. I feel like people now talk about sun sign, rising sign, your moon, a bunch of other things. But anyway, prominent areas of your chart are going to be things like your sun and your earth. They're going to be the north and the south node. They're going to be even, like, for me personally, you want to kind of look at your vocation, which is your design, Mars. So there's other places that are quite prominent in your chart, but the biggest energy is going to come from that personality sun, or the sun and the earth. What else do you need to know about gates? What I would invite you to do is to start to get to know your gates. And all you have to do is read about them, or listen to the gene keys, or listen to or watch something, and notice how your body responds to them. Notice what is true, what feels true for you, what feels like remembering. As I said in the beginning, what feels like, oh no, like what feels like real hard resistance, that actually is probably something you need to look at. And just start to work with those energies. Just start to see what is true for you. Gates in the beginning can be overwhelming. The gene keys can also be really overwhelming. It's because we're learning it with our head, okay? We're learning it with the mind. We're trying to make sense of the knowledge. We're trying to fit ourselves into, what Richard Rudd tells us about each gene key. And what I would invite you to do is to flip that on its head. Like, you don't have to fit into anything. All you got to do is listen, and listen with the whole body, and see what your body responds to at the time. One of the things with the gates as well, and, going through the gene keys in this way, what I would be really aware of is that you will focus on what you need to focus on when you need to focus on it. Often I hear that people start diving into their design and they will not even realize they have certain gates in their design for ages. In fact, that happened to me. I remember talking to Taylor a few years ago, and she has the 53 in a prominent place in her chart. And I was learning about it because of Taylor. And I was like, wow, this is cool. I wish I had this. And I do. And I didn't realize it. It never really struck me, funnily enough. And again, for me, I suppose I went for all the ones with the scary names, and I wanted to understand them and move through the challenge of the gate of struggle and the gate of crisis and those sort of things. And ultimately, that's where I went. And then the ones that felt lighter to me then sort of made themselves shown after a couple of years or whatever. But there is no rhyme or reason. You have to be able to just follow your own curiosity, follow your intuition, follow what do you want to learn about. If someone says, Have you looked up your vocation? And you're like, no, I'm curious. We'll go there. You know, if someone says, oh, have you learned about your incarnation cross? And you haven't, and it feels exciting, then go there. But maybe someone says, you know, have you done your Venus sequence yet? And I think this is interesting because I know for me, I left the Venus sequence to the last. I was like, yeah, I think I'm really pretty good here. I've done so much work on emotions and relationships and all this sort of stuff. And I dived into it and it like blew me wide open. It was amazing. And this is one of the pathways of the Gene Keys, by the way. So it just wasn't the time for me to do it beforehand. Obviously, I was telling myself stories, but the timing wasn't actually right. It was perfect timing when I actually did it. So it really does come down to, don't overthink it. Everyone thinks that they should know more about the gates. Like everyone in my world is like, oh my God, I'm trying to learn all the gates. Just go through the process. The best way to work with the gates is just to have fun with it. I also think with the understanding, like, a lot of the gates for me, there's a person that has a story. And I remember, like, I know for me with the gate 38, when I worked with Alison Charles, she has the 38 in a prominent place. And I remember her like learning about the 38 or reviewing the 38 for her session and being like, yes, oh my God, this is so Alison Charles. So that's how I remember them. You know, now I remember the 12 because Gabby Bernstein has it in her vocation. So for me, it works really well with the different people. Like I know the 7 really well because it's my youngest son's personality son. So it's like, this is how I learn them, but trust yourself. One of the girls in my team, she gets characters like Disney characters, which is such a great way to learn all the gates. So whatever works for you, do it. The biggest thing is this is the place where you're going to potentially face the greatest amount of overwhelm when it comes to human design. And overwhelm is nothing more than lack of clarity. Okay, that's why the brain goes into overwhelm. It's because it doesn't have clarity. This is where you want to remind yourself that there is no clarity. These gates of yours, these channels of yours, there is an overarching theme for each and every one of them, but they are not going to be, you can't get it right or wrong. This is your truth. It's your expression. You know, one of my favorite metaphors or examples that Ra Uru Hu used for human design, but it's so perfect for the gates, is that, you know, it's like the role of Romeo and Juliet. It's like the gates, let's say. It's like your human design. Like this has been written and it's the same words, but it's been, those same words have been expressed and said by hundreds of thousands of people, not hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of people probably have played Romeo all over the world. And not one of those people playing Romeo would have played it exactly the same way. That is the same for your human design and more specifically for the gates. So it's really about trusting what resonates with you, what really feels true and what feels repellent in a big way, because that's probably you too, and you're resisting you. And then the things that kind of like almost don't even hit the radar, like those things that don't even hit the radar, just pop them down. Don't even pay attention to them until they come back into your awareness, because if they don't, you don't need to worry about it. And if they do, then that will be the right timing. But at the end of the day, enjoy the process, because these really are, the gates are where you really differentiate. This is where you really start to dive into the depths of the detail of the energy that you are and that you came to bring to planet Earth. Now, that's all I'm going to share with you today. There is so many more levels on the gates, obviously. And that is super complicated, way too much to be doing here. But feel free to check out HDX, where we go into all the different ways that you can dive into the gates a lot further. But just run your experiment, play around with them. Maybe you need to get the PDF off the website, whatever it is, you go for it and just get to know you and how you are specifically different and awesome, because these are your superpowers. And as I said at the beginning, you are probably criticizing yourself or trying to change something about yourself that is here in these gates. It's here It's just being expressed through fear, or you're trying to keep a lid on it because you don't want to express your authenticity because it's not safe for some reason. So dive in, have fun, take the pressure off, and enjoy the ride of getting to know yourself even better. Thanks everyone for being with me today. And I trust you got what you needed, and I look forward to having you on the next podcast. Bye for now.
Thanks everyone for being here all the way to the end of the podcast. I hope you got lots of value out of it. I certainly had a lot of fun doing it. Could I please ask that you share this podcast with friends if you found it valuable? And also, bonus points, could you leave a review for me as well on Apple? It would be greatly appreciated. If at any point you would like to be on the podcast, or you've got questions that you'd like me to discuss on the podcast, by all means get on my socials and DM me. Everything you need is there in the show notes. Have an awesome day. Bye for now.